Chapter 7. The Greatest Exploits of Faith. It is my delight to welcome you to the 7th chapter of this book. Having said in the previous chapter that even non-Christian nations are producing exploits by their faith in themselves, I am now going to tell you about the greatest exploits of faith. In this chapter, we shall be discussing how faith could be used to subdue the nations of the earth. It will amaze you to find out in this chapter that you can become the father of nations through faith. Read on, friends, as I show you how to do that. Faith to become father of nations, Abraham's faith. Abraham is a name that you would hardly find a person in the whole wide world who would not have something to say about him. This is understandable because Abraham is the source of the three leading religions of the world: Christianity, Islam and Judaism. All these three religions mentioned above see their origin as being one way or the other connected to the person of Abraham. In all, over 3 billion people claim Abraham as their progenitor. Wow, what a heritage! What an influence! What a generation! What is it that gave Abraham the honor to become the progenitor of such a great dynasty? That is the question that we are going to try to explore in this chapter. Even more importantly though, I am going to try and answer the question, what can I and you do to deserve such an honor? As a Christian for almost 30 years, I have been privileged to have listened to thousands of messages surrounding the topic of Abraham. Ministers of God have preached about Christians being the heir of Abraham. We have spoken vastly about the blessings of Abraham. Some have preached on the faith of Abraham, yet others have laid emphasis on the fact that we are all children of Abraham. There could be no end to variations of messages and teachings surrounding the person of Abraham. No matter how we turn and twist this subject, in my thinking, the bottom line is for us to discover for ourselves how we could all replicate the exploits of Father Abraham. But how did he achieve such exploits? How come he is the father of nations? Well, the answer is obvious in the Bible. Even as Abraham believed God, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. Know you therefore that they which are of faith, the same are the children of Abraham. And the scripture, foreseeing that God would justify the heathen through faith, preached before the gospel unto Abraham, saying, In thee shall all nations be blessed. So then they which be of faith are blessed with faithful Abraham. Galatians chapter 3 verses 6-9. A paramount truth from this scripture is that the Almighty God is opening the eyes of every person everywhere to see the possibility of bringing salvation to whole nations, cities and countries. This is a very, very significant truth that we must pay attention to. I'm not sure you see what I am trying to point out yet. The first line of the verse above says, Abraham believed God and that was recorded as righteousness to him. Beyond recording his faith as righteousness, God went ahead to preach to Abraham that because of his faith, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed and shall be justified by faith. Therefore it was Abraham's faith that made him become the father of nations. Every nation can be saved by faith. The story of Abraham opens up a whole world of possibilities for us as individuals and for every nation under the sun. The opportunity is that every nation on earth has the chance of experiencing salvation. What we have learned from the example of Abraham is that every nation could experience redemption just as individuals do. This is a very somber realization. I know you may be asking in your mind, do you mean even the Islamic and Buddhist nations can be saved? My answer to your question is yes. They can be saved. Every nation and sphere of influence can experience salvation. The Islamic states in northern Nigeria can experience salvation too if someone would have faith enough to subdue them. The Bible is clear on that, and God has said that the heathen will be justified through faith. If you and I will have faith and believe God for any nation or people group, that nation or group will be saved. You don't have to see it to believe it, you only have to believe it to see it come to pass. You do not need to know precisely what is happening, or exactly where it is all going. What you need is to recognize the possibilities and challenges offered by the present moment, and to embrace them with courage, faith and hope. Thomas Merton. The purpose of this story of Abraham, the reason why God had to put it in the Bible, is not just for us to know it as a story. I also don't think that God documented Abraham's exploits only for us as ordinary mortals to simply admire and sing praises of how great Abraham was. No, sir. Yes, on one hand we could clearly see what Abraham became, but even more importantly, we are all supposed to see how great we could become as we follow the footsteps of Abraham. Please remember this lesson. Knowledge without exploits. The other lesson that we have to deduce from the Abrahamic story above is that God is so kind to humanity that he actually documented not just the story of what happened to Abraham, but more importantly the principle by which he was able to do what he did. Unfortunately today, as I listen to my fellow colleagues, teachers, theologians, elucidate the scriptures, it is easy to remember the stories of what Abraham did rather than the principles he used in the process. This does not only pertain to the Abraham story. When most preachers speak on Jesus, Moses, Joseph, Peter, Paul or any other biblical hero, what seems to come across is as if we simply need to know what they did and the processes and details of how everything happened, rather than emphasizing the principles, rules, algorithms and formulas behind each story and event. As a result, we have churches and nations filled with good Christian men and women who all know the stories of the Bible, but without the power. As a matter of fact, most of the world's renowned atheists and agnostics were raised up in churches. They remember the Bible stories from their Sunday schools, but because they were not exposed to the power behind these stories, they grew up to become enemies of the faith of their fathers. What is even worse than that, is the fact that majority of people who did not become atheists or agnostics, those who profess to be Christians and go to Sunday services religiously, might themselves simply know the stories of the Bible, without the exploits. The point I am trying to make is, the Holy Scriptures were given to us not just to know about what happened or how they happened. Even more importantly, we are to discover the principles behind the happenings. When we read our Bibles regularly in the comfort of our homes, we are not supposed to do this simply as a religious practice or dogma. Most of us already know the stories. That is not why we read the scriptures on daily basis. The real reason why we read the scriptures on regular basis is to derive more and more secrets behind each manifestation, with the intent of reproducing them. If you read the scriptures, yet remain where you are, then you are missing out on the most important aspect of the exercise. If you go to church regularly, listen to sermons, quote the scriptures and yet don't come out to perform similar exploits, it means you have lost out on the purpose of the exercise. All of us have been given faith, but it is unfortunate that most people use their faith for petty things like buying fine clothes, building a big church, having recognition and fame, and to provide for individual selfish needs. Everyone has been given faith, and at the end of the day, we will know what each person used his or her faith for. But if faith is worth using at all, we must use it for something of everlasting value. Abraham used his own faith to subdue nations. I challenge you through this book that you too should use your faith not for petty things like bread and butter, but for subduing kingdoms and nations for the King of the universe. It was only one ingredient that qualified Abraham to become the father of nations, and that was the fact that he used his faith the right way. The same faith has been given to you and me in varying measures. Even if you have a faith that is the size of a mustard seed, it can produce exploits if you direct it properly. It is my prayer that God will open your eyes to see the possibility that ordinary men like you and I can become fathers of nations just by exercising our faith rightly. The secret to redeeming nations. When you go to church, don't just read the Bible and quote the scriptures, seek to find out the secrets behind the occurrences therein. One of the greatest lessons we could learn from Abraham is that he discovered a principle, secret, through which nations could be redeemed. What I mean is that one major lesson we could learn from the life of Abraham is that his relationship with God did not just stop at being a religious exercise as most of us often do. He derived insight from his relationship with God, which is what we are supposed to be doing today. More importantly though, Abraham took advantage of those secrets and insights he learned from his walk with God. Abraham practiced what he learned from God in practical terms. For example, he discovered that God was a great God, and the next thing you see is that Abraham became exceedingly great. When he discovered that God was the Lord of the universe who owns heaven and earth, soon afterwards we could read that Abraham had established his own estate, whereby he had become wealthy in livestock, silver and in gold. When Abraham discovered the righteousness of God and his perfection that became his goal and aspiration, soon afterwards we could read about Abraham becoming the righteousness of God. When Abraham found out that God is about relationship, he began to pursue him so much that God would soon brag on him that, "Behold Abraham my friend." How would you like being called a friend of God? What an envious place to be. You indeed could become one. The key is, look for secrets and principles in the Bible instead of just reading the stories. What is the principle that Abraham took advantage of that qualified him to become father of nations? Remember that Abraham, from what we have read above, is a very practical and pragmatic believer. What he discovered in God, he manifested in life. So I deem it important for us to know what secret Abraham discovered that qualified him to become father of nations. Gal 3-8. God would justify the heathen nations through faith. Wow, what a secret! Bearing in mind that there were no scriptures in the days of Abraham, the question arises, how did Abraham get to know this? Note that I had mentioned earlier that all his revelations came to him through his personal relationship and interactions with God. To Abraham, he was not religious, he was on a journey with God in discovering secrets. So must we be. That same passage in Gal 3-8 tells us how Abraham came across this revelation. It was preached to him by God himself. Preached before the gospel unto Abraham. Friends, can you believe that? The same way we go to churches today to listen to preaching, God preached to Abraham. It was now left to him and him alone if he was going to take advantage of the messages or not. Would he simply listen to a good sermon, or he would go as far as to derive secrets and principles from it? We too face the same choice each time we read the Bible, listen to sermons or quote the scriptures. Are we engaging in religious exercise that only enlarges our knowledge base, or are we actually looking for principles to apply, by which we could also become what we are reading about? Faith acts out what it believes. Faith is active. It is not dead. The definition of faith we started this book with in chapter 1 read, "Faith is the substance of things hoped for. The evidence of things not seen." I want you to pay attention to the word is suggests to me that faith is present and alive. Faith is not dead. Whatever is alive therefore must be active. That is why I don't believe most Christians who tell me they have faith when I can't see them actively transforming their nation or sphere of influence by their faith. You can't tell me you have faith in God if you are not actively using that faith to subdue something, to engage something and to create something. The church I see today has no action and seems to be dead, and that is why I believe that what we call faith is mostly mere religion. Thank God Abraham was a man of action. When he discovered that nations could become righteous by faith, he took advantage of it. He decided to believe God for his own nation. Abraham stepped out by faith in a rather difficult circumstances. How could you become the father of nations when you could not even have a child? This was a daunting challenge before Abraham. Yet, he successfully confronted and surmounted the challenge. He believed until he saw the manifestation. I don't think that we're meant to understand it all the time. I think that sometimes we just have to have faith. Nicholas Sparks. He moved ahead to work and labor to create his own nation. Building economic power, sustainable wealth base, laying foundations for the next generations that he couldn't see. He stepped out by faith, changed locations, dug wells, made friends, fought wars. Was he doing all these for himself? No, sir. He was doing all these for the nation he had believed God for. A righteous nation that is created and justified by faith. Is he not just an empty dreamer? At this point, remember, he did not even have a son yet. Faith does not only believe, faith acts out what it believes. What doth it profit, my brethren, though a man say he hath faith, and have not works? Can faith save him? Thus also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. James chapter 2 verses 14, 17. If we really believe that Nigeria can be transformed, our action would show it. If all the Christians who spend every day of the week praying for Nigeria really believe in their prayers, they would take necessary steps and actions to seeing that the country is truly transformed. They will, like Abraham, go ahead to work and labor to create the kind of nation they are praying for. If we really believe in the future of our nation, we would not only have faith but add to that faith work. We would work to build economic power. We would work to build sustainable wealth base. If we are really serious about transforming our nation by faith, we would stop calling on God every day to change our nation, but would rather add hard work to our faith. We would, instead of building megachurches, lay foundations for the next generations in science and technology, in medicine, in engineering and in agriculture. If you believe in anything, your works will prove it. Your faith will only be materialized when you add work to it. Other than that, that faith is dead. Abraham was not special. Friends, did it ever cross your mind? Why Abraham? Is there anything special about him? I used to think there was something special about him until now that I hear people asking similar questions about me. Why Sunday Adelaja? Is there something special about him? I know for a fact that there is nothing special about me. I simply discovered some secrets as Abraham did. I hope as you follow me in this discovery and adventure through my books, articles, messages, videos, interviews that you too will begin to discover some life-changing secrets that would turn you into giants of your era and generation. The modus operandi of God is that he would normally start with a model. In all things, God always needed an example for others to follow. Israel was such an example. God needed Abraham also as an example for others who would come after him. God needed to create a picture to put before all peoples in all nations and from all generations that behold a man who dared believe God and became counted for righteousness because of it. The message God is trying to pass across to us today is that, see, have a good look, if he could do it. If he could believe me and I could make him into a father of nations, then that is a good proof for you to follow suit. God needed an example for all of us who, like Abraham, would have the privilege to listen to teachings, preaching and messages from the scriptures, so that we might know what to do with them. God doesn't want the accomplishments to stop only on him, hence he raises models. Models are there to be copied, to be replicated and duplicated. I personally believe that God wants us to learn magnitudes, scopes and capacities from the actions of Abraham. What I mean is, unlike what most preachers and believers preach today, by using the faith of Abraham just to provide for daily bread. The magnitude and scope of Abraham's actions show us that our faith should rather be used for great things. Instead of us to use the faith of Abraham to only meet our needs, we should rather expand our faith to inherit nations, wrought righteousness, subdue empires and bring glory to God Almighty. Heirs of nations. It is expedient to know that the promise to become father of nations is not to Abraham alone. For the promise, that he should be the heir of the world, was not to Abraham, or to his seed, through the law, but through the righteousness of faith. Therefore it is of faith that it might be by grace, to the end the promise might be sure to all the seed, not to that only which is of the law, but to that also which is of the faith of Abraham, who is the father of us all. Rom. 4:13-16. Wow, this is completely unbelievable. Are you seeing what I am seeing? Abraham does not have a sole right to become father of nations. That promise is not given to him alone, but to anyone that would believe like him. According to this scriptures, each and every one of us could by faith inherit a nation in the world. Beside nations, we could actually become heirs of any aspect of the world as well. Remember, I am not telling you the story of what happened or how it happened. I am helping you to see a principle, concept, postulate, and an inevitability. Which means when I as an individual understands and follows the same principle that was applied by Abraham, then I could expect the same or similar results to what Abraham got. Please pay attention to the fact that according to this scripture above, Abraham did not become the heir of the world because he was special. Not even because he was chosen or called. If that were the case, then it would not be accessible to everyone else. But thank God, it is by faith that he became who he became. Therefore I too could trust God to become an heir of the world, any sphere of life, by faith like him. Each and every one of us could become a father of nations. As it is written, I have made you a father of many nations in the presence of him who he believed, God. Rom. 4:17. Friends, the truth is, every one of us could become fathers of nations. I implore you to choose what sphere of the society you want to disciple and father. Is it the music industry? Is it the educational sector? Is it politics, business, media, sports or arts? Any one of these spheres could be transformed by you if you believe and act. The enduring faith. Now let's look into the process of possibly becoming fathers of nations. Therefore it is of faith, that it might be by grace, to the end the promise might be sure to all the seed, not to that only which is of the law, but to that also which is of the faith of Abraham, who is the father of us all, as it is written, I have made thee a father of many nations, before him whom he believed, even God, who quickeneth the dead, and calleth those things which be not as though they were. Who against hope believed in hope, that he might become the father of many nations, according to that which was spoken, so shall thy seed be. Rom. 4:16-18. One of the essentials to becoming father of faith is not only to believe, even though all exploits in life start with faith. However, to become a father of nations is a different ball game altogether. In this case you must not simply have faith, but you must be able to have what I call an enduring faith like Abraham. It is a persevering faith that enables you to keep on believing when visible realities are showing you the opposite of what you are believing for. It is the ability to, like Abraham against hope, believe in hope. Whenever you have sacrificed and paid a huge price for things to change in your nation and you look, instead of seeing what you had believed God for, yet the realities are the same. It is in such a situation like this, you need an enduring faith to keep on moving, to keep on believing, to keep on trusting, to keep on sacrificing and to keep on daring. Another aspect of this faith that enables a person become father of nations, is the ability to begin from nothing and yet work for the invincible future and destiny of the nation. Abraham was working for the building of the new nation even when he didn't have a seed of his own to start with. He was constructing a new nation without even having a child. Then after he had a seed in Isaac, that is still a long way from becoming a nation from one son, yet he persevered, believed, trusted and moved on in faith until he saw the manifestation. His faith justified him. Isaac indeed would one day become one of the leading nations of the earth. Where are the Abrahams? Most of our nations today are frankly speaking heathen nations, howbeit they are modern. We are all therefore in the same starting point as Abraham. Now we must perform the same exploits that Abraham performed by faith for our own nations. The good thing is God has made provision for the justification of nations. His words are established in heaven forever. It is final, that nations can be saved and be redeemed by faith. And the scripture, foreseeing that God would justify the heathen through faith, preached before the gospel unto Abraham, saying, In thee shall all nations be blessed. Gal 3-8. God has done his own part, he has made the provision and he has made clear the rules of the game. The only thing that is left is, men and women who could trust God as did Abraham, to help bring back their nations to God Almighty. Every nation must be given birth to by someone through faith. Just like we have every man given birth to by a woman, so also must every nation be given birth to by faith, because those nations that we see today were also once given birth to in the natural by their progenitors. We must do the same thing by faith. God is on the lookout in search for such individuals who could become fathers of each and every nation under the sun, as well as every sphere of life in any given society. Abraham therefore is the shadow of things to come for each and every one of us to follow in the example of his faith. He was a model that we must all emulate. He was our prototype on how we today could bring our nations to the feet of the Redeemer. He will lift up a banner to the nations from afar, and will whistle to them from the end of the earth. Surely they shall come with speed, swiftly. Isa 5:26. I pray that your nation and sphere of life will be one of those who will run to God speedily. Ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude this chapter, I would like to ask you a question. Do you believe that you and I can repeat the exploits of Father Abraham? I believe God put that story in the Bible so that he could reproduce such exploits in every one of us. God has a desire and a dream that Abraham will not be one but many. The hope of God was, maybe if I record the story there in the Bible, I would be able to get more people who would claim nations of the earth for me. God was expecting that you and I would pay the price and go to any length to become fathers of the nations and spheres of influence where we've found ourselves. God must have said to himself, I will give them a story for inspiration. I will give them an example to follow. Maybe they will dare to believe me. Unfortunately, we have just abused God's generosity, and instead of us taking up the challenge, we've resolved to just preaching and telling stories of how great Abraham was. Instead of us to believe and say, God, I thank you that I have an example of someone who has done it, and I too will exercise my faith to become the father of a nation. We are busy just preaching the faith of Abraham without repeating the exploits of that faith. It is a pity that we have missed it. Dear friends, you can subdue the territory of education, you can subdue the territory of politics, you can subdue the economic and business sphere, and you can become the father of the medical and scientific sphere. I believe every Christian can by faith become fathers of the nations of technology, nations of media and art, nations of sports and every other nation, sphere of influence. You and I can become Abrahams in our various nations. I pray that God will redirect our faith and cause us to produce the greatest exploit of faith with it, the exploits of subduing nations and territories back to God. In the following chapter, I will be revealing that which has hindered the faith of the Church and kept her in a state of dormancy. Practical steps to overcoming that hindrance will also be rendered. Do well to read on, my friends. 1. Every nation on earth has the chance of experiencing salvation. 2. What we have learned from the example of Abraham is that every nation could experience redemption just as individuals do. 3. Every nation and sphere of influence can experience salvation. The Islamic states in northern Nigeria can experience salvation too if someone would have faith enough to subdue them. 4. If you and I will have faith and believe God for any nation or people group, that nation or group will be saved. You don't have to see it to believe it, you only have to believe it to see it come to pass. 5. We are all supposed to see how great we could become as we follow the footsteps of Abraham. 6. If you go to church regularly, listen to sermons, quote the scriptures and yet don't come out to perform similar exploits, it means you have lost out on the purpose of the exercise. 7. All of us have been given faith, but it is unfortunate that most people use their faith for petty things like buying fine clothes, building a big church, having recognition and fame, and to provide for individual selfish needs. 8. If faith is worth using at all, we must use it for something of everlasting value. Abraham used his own faith to subdue nations. 9. I challenge you through this book that you too should use your faith not for petty things like bread and butter but for subduing kingdoms and nations for the King of the universe. 10. It is my prayer that God will open your eyes to see the possibility that ordinary men like you and I can become fathers of nations just by exercising our faith rightly. 11. I don't believe most Christians who tell me they have faith when I can't see them actively transforming their nation or sphere of influence by their faith. 12. You can't tell me you have faith in God if you are not actively using that faith to subdue something, to engage something and to create something. 13. Faith does not only believe, faith acts out what it believes. 14. If we really believe that Nigeria can be transformed, our action would show it. If all the Christians who spend every day of the week praying for Nigeria really believe in their prayers, they would take necessary steps and actions to seeing that the country is truly transformed. 15. Your faith is only measured by your exploits, not by your prayers. Chapter 8. The fear of the church. In the previous chapter, we saw how the greatest exploit of faith can be done. I believe it is obvious now that a nation can be subdued by faith. It is however unfortunate that we don't see the supposed people of faith, the church, becoming fathers of nations and spheres of influence. The reason why the church is not repeating the exploits of faith of Father Abraham is what I will be discussing with you in this chapter. I implore you to read on till the end so as to grasp the full revelation of the subject matter. Fear, the enemy of faith. Dear friends, could fear be the reason why the faith of most Christians do not produce exploits? Is it ever possible that the people of faith could also be a people of fear? Can faith and fear exist together? Looking at the exploits of some of the names we've mentioned in this book, one could see that they all were daring people, people who have been able to overcome their fears. If most of our churches are not producing exploits and results while most atheists and non-Christians are saturating the earth with their inventions and results, then it would not be wrong of me to conclude that they are more courageous than us Christians. It is however unfortunate that my assertion is true. Unfortunate because it should be the other way round. The people who believe in God should be more courageous than those who do not, and that courage should translate into exploits and results. Faith is a living, daring confidence in God's grace, so sure and certain that a man could stake his life on it 1,000 times. Martin Luther. Fear is synonymous with doubt and unbelief. It is timidity and cowardice. If fear is unbelief, then we could say it is the opposite of faith. If this is true, then the people who claim to be believers should not be afraid. Fear should not even be mentioned among them. But from what history has revealed, it is rather those who do not believe in God that are not afraid of daring and inventing and discovering. The non-believers have been shown to have more courage than most believers. Have you ever wondered why the church does not get involved in politics? Have you wondered why most churches cannot go and evangelize the pubs, brothels and clubs and would rather hide within the four walls of a church building? The answer is simply fear, fear that they will be contaminated by the world. Pastors would rather keep their members within the four walls than send them forth in the world to do exploits for the kingdom. If you have a dream, don't just sit there. Gather courage to believe that you can succeed and leave no stone unturned to make it a reality. Ruplin. This fear of daring and exploring has made Christians live in isolation from the world. There is no way we can saturate the earth with exploits in medicine, science and technology and in engineering when we hide within the four walls of church. There is no way we can bring salvation to those in the clubs and brothels if we don't go and reach out to them. Every father of faith who pioneered a revival in the past was courageous and daring. It is a pity that the present-day church is full of Christians whose attitude is for the most part that of fear, lethargy, inactivity, apathy and defeat. Until you eliminate fear from your life, you can never do exploits. Fear limits you and puts you in bondage. It enslaves you and makes your faith ineffective. That was exactly what happened to Peter, the disciple of Jesus. Peter's faith and fear. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, "It is a spirit," and they cried out for fear. But straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water. Matthew chapter 14 verses 26 to 28. Dear friends, you will notice from the verses above that Jesus was working on the sea. That was an exploit of faith that no one had done before, and when the disciples saw him, they trembled and thought he was a spirit. How was Jesus able to walk on the waters? It was because he had faith. He believed he could walk on the waters like a dry land, and because of that faith the water became to him as dry land and he walked on it. Whenever you have faith, the unimaginable happens. The disciples, however, were overtaken with fear and cried out until Jesus revealed himself to them. But because of fear and doubt they still didn't believe him, and Peter, wanting to be sure, requested that Jesus invite him to walk also through the water, of which Jesus responded in the affirmative. And he said, Come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water, to go to Jesus. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand, and caught him, and said unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? Matthew chapter 14 verses 29 to 31. Wherever in the Bible people had faith, results were produced. The same was true in the case with Peter. When Peter saw that Jesus was walking on the water, he said to himself, Maybe I could do this too. That was faith. And because he had that faith, he walked on the waters. As long as he had faith, he was walking on the water. That faith produced result. However, as soon as he doubted and became afraid, he began to sink. Fear caused him to start sinking, even though he still believed in Jesus. Even though he was a believer in Christ like you and I, he began to sink because of fear. Fear of what? Fear of the wind, fear that he would not be able to make it to where Jesus was, and fear that he was going to sink. In other words, he started doubting himself and didn't believe in himself anymore. His exploits ceased as soon as he began to doubt himself and to fear. It is the same thing with most churches today. Most Christians are not doing exploits because of fear. Even though they still believe in God, the fear of going out to explore the wonders which God created in the universe has limited their exploits. Everyone sees the moon. Some said it's wonderful and thanked God for making such a beautiful light. Others began to worship it. But only a few had faith enough to go and explore it and see exactly what it is made of. We believe that God made the world, but those who do not believe in God are the people exploring and discovering all that our Father has created, while we gather in church halls every day pretending to be a people of faith. What an absurdity! Is this not an anomaly? Is it not out of place for strangers to come into your house and discover the hidden riches which your Father has kept for you to discover? That is why it breaks my heart to see Christians living in fear without any exploits while unbelievers Gather all the courage there is to explore the universe and come forth with inventions and discoveries. If we say we are really a people of faith, how come we don't have exploits? It is because when it comes to the earth, you need more faith in yourself than in God, like I have already stated. So for you to reign on earth, for you to rule on earth, you need to eliminate fear and replace it with faith in yourself. You need to believe that you are capable of all things. That was what happened with Peter. When Peter was walking on the water, he had faith that he could walk, that was why he was walking. Even when he was sinking, he still had faith in God because he was seeing Jesus in front of him, but started sinking only because he lost faith in himself and fear came in. When it comes to exploits and ruling on the earth, you need to have faith in yourself and be courageous. So the problem with Peter was not that he stopped believing in Jesus. He didn't stop believing in Jesus, he still kept on believing in Jesus. Jesus was right before him, he couldn't doubt Jesus, he believed in Jesus but he doubted himself. He didn't believe himself, he didn't believe that he could still walk on that water. He had doubt in himself and that led to fear. Hence he started to sink. And that is a lesson for us. To function on the earth, you must overcome fear and build so much faith in yourself that you can do all things. Believe something and the universe is on its way to being changed. Because you've changed, by believing. Once you've changed, other things start to follow. Isn't that the way it works? Diane Duane. The whole universe can be changed if you can believe. Nations can be changed if you will believe. Whatsoever it is that we believe we can achieve will definitely be achieved. If you believe in anything, it will come to pass. Everything changes when there is faith. Faith first changes you and then you begin to change things by your faith. Even Peter saw the waters as a solid ground and began to walk on it as soon as he had faith in himself. His faith changed the water to a solid ground in his eyes. Faith turns mountains into plain grounds. Faith turns valleys into leveled grounds. Faith turns sinking sands to solid grounds. What is it that looks impossible in your eyes? With faith in yourself, you can turn it to possibilities. If you, however, decide to remain fearful and doubt your abilities, you will only be revealing to the world that you don't understand the essence of faith and the role you are to play on the earth by that faith. Faith is supposed to empower you to rule as king and as prince on the earth. Dear friends, it is unimaginable to see princes hide because of fear, leaving the reign of their kingdom in the hands of servants. There is no region in the world where kings hand over their thrones to servants to manage because of inferiority complex. Though there are no such kingdoms in the world, but I am afraid that the Nigerian church may be one. It is unfortunate that the church has exemplified a kingdom whose king is so fearful that he hides and allows his subjects to take charge of his throne. But I thought the church were a people of faith, how could they be said to be afraid? Well, the proof of faith is the exploits produced by that faith. When I look at the Nigerian church, I do not seem to see the exploits that their faith has produced in the nation. Rather, what I see are a people who just gather every weekday and on Sundays praying, dancing and just enjoying themselves within the four walls of a building called church. Unlike the church in the Book of Acts, I do not see the modern-day believers in Nigeria take over cities and spheres of influence by their faith. I do not see the kind of exploits that were recorded to have been done by the apostles of old. I wonder where we inherited this inferiority complex from. The sinking church. Ladies and gentlemen, if the church does not eradicate fear from its members, it will soon start sinking just like Peter did. If we don't begin to create exploits by faith, we would soon become irrelevant on the earth. The church has already started losing its relevance on the earth. Without exploits, there is no relevance. Why do we respect Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and Mark Zuckerberg? Why do we hold at high esteem the Wright brothers, Neil Armstrong, and the other great names in history? It is because of the exploits they were able to produce by their faith. If you have no exploits, nobody will respect you. When churches did exploits by faith in the days of old, everyone ran to the church for help and had respect for the church. In the days of Charles Finney, Jonathan Edwards, Benson Idahosa, and John Calvin, the church had great relevance because of the exploits these men created in their nations by their faith. There was a mass entrance of people into the church then because the church represented everything society had to offer. From schools to hospitals, to workshops, to orphanages, etc. When people needed to learn to read and write, they went to the church or its missionary schools. When people needed health care, they went to missionary hospitals and so on and so forth. The church had complete impact on the society by the exploits and result it produced. The church was completely in contact with the world to influence it. It is, however, a sad thing to say that the modern church we see today has none of such exploits and hence is fast losing its relevance. If the church and the believers refuse to produce exploits, there will be nothing left than for the world to lose respect for the church. If the faith we profess cannot produce some evidence in the form of exploits, then we are bound to lose our relevance. We will surely sink like Peter if we don't brace up our faith and do exploits with it. Why should the government look up to us when we have nothing to offer the nation? Why should the sick look up to us when we have no hospitals to take care of them? Why should the illiterates come to church when we have no schools to educate them? Why should the orphans come to us when we have no orphanages? Why should the computer illiterates come to us when we have no computer training classes? Why should the poor come to us when we will collect the little money they have as offering and tithe? Now tell me, what does the church have to offer the world? Sadly, nothing. All the needs listed above can be met in the secular world and hence there is no need for anyone to come to the church. Oh, how we have lost our relevance. Because we are afraid to dare, because we have no exploits, we are gradually sinking. Most people who were raised in church are leaving the church in mass. The reason is because there is nothing in church that is relevant to their life's purpose and calling. The secular world will help them fulfill their purpose, unlike the church, which is only interested in keeping them within the four walls. They have seen enough of the miracle services, breakthrough services and anointing services which did not in any way add value to their lives but instead took out the little money they had in their pockets in the name of breakthrough offering, prophetic offering and seed faith offering. No exploits, no results, no impact on society, and yet we claim to be a people of faith. If we do not begin to resolve national issues, help people discover their purpose, add value to the lives of people, educate and train people, we would soon realize that our churches will be empty. It is time to begin to measure our faith by our exploits. It is time to produce results by our faith that will bring relevance and importance to the church again. It is my prayer that you will dare, explore, become courageous, eliminate fear and create exploits with your faith. Do the thing you fear and the death of fear is certain. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Make it your habit to do things you're afraid of. If you do what you are afraid of, then your fear dies. When you are brave, this invincible power rises up inside of you, and your every act of courage leads to the increase of your courage. This makes you stronger and braver when you confront fear in the future. Every time you do not have guarantee of success, take a step and move forward. And your fear will decrease as your courage and confidence increases. Finally, you would reach a stage in your life when you are not afraid of anything. The day courage triumphed over fear. Dear friends, do you remember I told you about the first man to step foot in the moon? Do you remember his name? Neil Armstrong. Yes, Neil Armstrong is the first person to set his foot in moon. Well, he was not supposed to be the first person. Do you know who was supposed to be the first person? I guess you don't know him because many people do not know him. His name is Edwin C. Aldrin. Stories have it that he was the pilot for the Apollo mission. He was working for the American Air Force. Moreover, he had experience of spacewalking, hence was selected as the pilot. Neil Armstrong worked for the American Navy. He was selected for his courage as co-pilot. When the Apollo mission landed on Moon, they received a command from NASA, pilot first. But Aldrin was hesitant. What will happen? Will I get sucked in or will I burn out, etc.? The hesitation was not for hours, but few seconds. In the meantime, NASA sent the next command, co-pilot next. Within next second, Neil Armstrong put his foot on the moon and became part of world history. World history was changed in 1 second. Though Aldrin had the qualification and talent, because of hesitation and fear he is not recognized by many people. The world remembers only the person who comes first. This is a good example of how people lose out because of hesitation and fear. Whenever you see the moon, remember this: a moment's hesitation can stop us from our greatest victory. We all have great potential in us. The only thing that stops us from achieving what we are supposed to achieve is our hesitation, fear and shyness. This story is exactly a figure of the church I see today. We have all the anointing, the faith, the gifts and talents like Aldrin, but because of fear and hesitation, the world does not recognize us. The courageous atheists and non-Christians are producing more exploits in various spheres of influence in the world, while most of us just hide in church buildings, afraid of daring and exploring the world. Religion is not faith. It is a reality in our world today that most people are just used to religion and think they are practicing faith. You should measure your faith by your exploits. So if you go to church, I want to see the results that the faith you have in God is producing for you. If you don't have results and you go to church all your life, you are of no value. I will lock you out of my house because you have become irrelevant. You are like salt that has lost its savor and is now good for nothing. You deserve to be trampled under feet. If you have given all your life to church activities but have no results, it is an exercise in religiosity. You are just being religious. You are supposed to challenge yourself and put your faith to work. If you have been going to church all this while, where are your exploits? If you have been believing in God all this while, where is the result of your faith? Let me show you something about that. Jesus said unto him, If thou canst believe, all things are possible to him that believeth. Mark chapter 9 verse 23. Did you see that all things are possible if you believe? This means that if you are a believer, all things become possible to you. But why don't you have results as a Christian? Don't tell me you have been waiting on God or looking at His face. That is why you have no results. Okay, even if you don't have result in that area that you are waiting on God for, you should at least have results somewhere else. But for you not to have results altogether and everywhere is just dry, it is unpardonable. It is time for you to begin to question your faith. Faith must produce results. True faith in God and in yourself must produce results. If your faith is not producing results, you are just practicing religion. Faith must have proof, faith must have evidence. Faith must have substance. If your church activities have no exploits, it is mere religion. If those activities do not change the status quo, then it is ordinary religion. Do you know the woman that was sick and was bent over for 18 years? She must have been going to the synagogue for those 18 years, yet no healing power healed her. There was no change in status quo. Her infirmity prevailed for 18 years, yet religion could not heal her. And he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath. And, behold, there was a woman which had a spirit of infirmity 18 years, and was bowed together, and could in no wise lift up herself. And when Jesus saw her, he called her to him, and said unto her, Woman, thou art loosed from thine infirmity. And he laid his hands on her, and immediately she was made straight, and glorified God. And the ruler of the synagogue answered with indignation, because that Jesus had healed on the Sabbath day, and said unto the people, There are 6 days in which men ought to work, in them therefore come and be healed, and not on the Sabbath day. Luke chapter 13 verses 10 to 14. Ladies and gentlemen, thank God for the faith of Jesus. It has power to heal, to deliver, to set free, to transform and to save. Faith carries tremendous power to effect positive change. It is productive and does exploits. For good 18 years, none of the leaders of the synagogue could effect a change. None of them could heal her. That is the problem with religion. It doesn't produce any valuable result. Just like the woman that was bent over, so is the Nigerian economy. Our economy has been bent over for some years now. Corruption has bent the country over. Our educational system is bent over for many years. Politics and governance is bent over. Electricity cannot straighten up. Refineries are bent over too. The church has been for as long as these problems have been, yet not one impact on these sectors. We gather every Sunday to dance, sing and pray, but not one of these problems has been solved. How dare we even say we are a people of faith when it is obvious that we are just practicing religion? If it is faith, it would have healed the economy. If we are really a people of faith, that faith would have healed the power sector, the educational sector, the politics and governance of the nation. But to have done church for so long and yet not have a healing effect on the country makes it obvious that we have just been enjoying religion and confusing it for faith. The woman in the story above must have been with religion for those 18 years of her infirmity, yet with no exploit from religion. But when faith finally showed up in the person of Jesus, it healed the woman immediately. Faith always produces exploit. Unfortunately, the religion that could not heal was the first to find fault and criticize the healing process. That is the state of the church in my country. Instead of the church to do exploits with their faith, they are busy arguing whether women should tie their hair to church or not. Instead of transforming the economy, they are still battling with ladies wearing trousers to church and what hairstyle they should or should not do. They have replaced religion with faith. I pray that your faith will begin to produce results, exploits and evidence. In conclusion, I will like to say that enough of the fearful religion we practice in the name of church. It is time to dare to explore. to invent and to change our nation have been given, and by so doing relevance will be In the next chapter, I am going to be showing you some exploits of faith that your believing in God should produce. Ride on with me as we move to see the possibilities available to every one of us. 1. This fear of daring and exploring has made Christians live in isolation from the world. 2. There is no way we can saturate the earth with exploits in medicine, science and technology and in engineering when we hide within the four walls of church. 3. There is no way we can bring salvation to those in the clubs and brothels if we don't go and reach out to them. 4. It is a pity that the present-day church is full of Christians whose attitude is for the most part that of fear, lethargy, inactivity, apathy and defeat. 5. Until you eliminate fear from your life you can never do exploits. Fear limits you and puts you in bondage. It enslaves you and makes your faith ineffective. 6. It breaks my heart to see Christians living in fear without any exploits while unbelievers gather all the courage there is to explore the universe and come forth with inventions and discoveries. 7. We believe that God made the world, but those who do not believe in God are the people exploring and discovering all that our Father has created while we gather in church halls every day pretending to be a people of faith. What an absurdity. 8. For you to reign on earth, for you to rule on earth, you need to eliminate fear and replace it with faith in yourself. You need to believe that you are capable of all things. 9. When it comes to exploits and ruling on the earth, you need to have faith in yourself and be courageous. To function on the earth, you must overcome fear and build so much faith in yourself that you can do all things. 10. The whole universe can be changed if you can believe. Nations can be changed if you will believe. Whatsoever it is that we believe we can achieve will definitely be achieved. Everything changes when there is faith. Faith first changes you and then you begin to change things by your faith. 11. Unlike the church in the book of Acts, I do not see the modern-day believers in Nigeria take over cities and spheres of influence by their faith. 12. If the church does not eradicate fear from its members, it will soon start sinking just like Peter did. If we don't begin to create exploits by faith, we would soon become irrelevant on the earth. 13. If we do not begin to resolve national issues, help people discover their purpose, add value to the lives of people, educate and train people, we would soon realize that our churches will be empty. 14. To have done church for so long and yet not have a healing effect on the country makes it obvious that we have just been enjoying religion and confusing it for faith. 15. If it is faith, it would have healed the economy. If we are really a people of faith, that faith would have healed the power sector, the educational sector, the politics and governance of the nation.
Ça vous dit, tu n'es pas pro, tu vois. Tu n'es pas pro. Il y a tout ça, le comportement. C'est le comportement qui dit.
Chapter 10. Let men of faith arise. Hello friends, my congratulations to you for following through till the last chapter of this book. Before we begin to look at this concluding chapter, I would like us to do a review of all that we've said about faith from the first chapter. We started by defining faith and by saying that faith is supposed to always produce tangible results and exploits. You learned that people who believe in God are supposed to be people of results because faith is an instrument that God has given unto us to produce results. In the second chapter we discussed the power of faith and how it can be used to transform our nation. Furthermore, the third chapter emphasized the need to produce results in business, media, arts, education, and in every other sphere of our society by our faith. The next chapter stressed that there is a cause for which our faith should be used to deliver our nation from the challenges that it's faced with, and chapter 5 declares that all things are possible to him that believes. In chapter 6, we emphasized the fact that to rule on earth you need more faith in yourself than in God, and explained why non-Christian nations are able to do exploits even though they don't believe in God. Chapter 7 revealed the greatest exploit of faith, and chapter 8 talks about how fear is hindering the church from performing exploits by faith. Chapter 9 reassures the believer that if only he can believe, then he would be able to wrought signs and wonders by his faith in various spheres of life. And now in this 10th chapter I am calling on you and everyone else who is a Christian to arise and solve every problem that exists in our nation by your faith. I encourage you to pay keen attention to the truths that will be revealed in this chapter. Reigning by faith. Dear friends, there is an emergency. Our nation is fast decaying, our educational standard is getting worse by the day, corruption has become synonymous with our politicians. The media has nothing good that can educate our kids and challenge them to greatness. We celebrate gangsters, hooligans, and morally derailed youths. Hard work is not rewarded, geniuses are ignored, and mediocrity is applauded. We have a failed government, a failed system, and an economically recessed nation. We are nowhere to be found among the list of industrialized nations. We are not on the list of countries with scientific and medical inventions. Even on the list of Olympic gold winners, we are still lagging behind. The only thing we seem to be known for is religion. We are on the list of the most religious countries in the world. That would have at least been a good recognition if that religion had positively impacted our nation. It would have been a thing of joy if we chose to practice true faith as we have made the world to believe. That faith would have produced some exploits that would transform our nation. Unfortunately, we have chosen religion over faith. We have exalted religion above real faith. We neglected that which has the power to resolve all our national challenges and rather settled for that which is weak, ineffective, and non-productive. Instead of us to reign by faith, we have allowed ourselves to be weakened by religion, fear, and ignorance. Fear, the lack of courage to dare. Ignorance of the power of faith and of the great potential we have to do the impossible, and the worst of all, religion, the opium of the masses. You are supposed to reign as a king in your nation by the exploits of faith you produce. Your exploits of faith are supposed to give you some form of relevance and respect. When you shine some light into the darkness that is in the world, and particularly in your nation and sphere of influence, you're exhibiting the true character of a man of faith. However, we only preach it but don't practice it. It will be foolishness to just preach about being the light of the world without giving light to all the spheres of influence and sectors in our country. You are supposed to light up the darkness in the world of politics, the darkness in the world of sports, and the darkness in the world of media, education, and economics. The Church must raise up an army of men and women whose faith would produce exploits that will illuminate any sphere of the country where there is darkness. It is time to come out of hiding and go touch the world with our results and exploits. Light doesn't run away from darkness. It rather gives illumination to it. It is not enough to sit back in church and say the world is living in darkness. If we are really a people of faith, one of our exploits will be to put an end to darkness wherever we find it in the society. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Martin Luther King Jr. If you think the political system in your nation is in the dark, it's not a big deal, simply go and illuminate it. If you believe you can transform that system, then draw a strategy on how you could bring insight, enlightenment, and relevance to it. The power of faith can change any sphere of influence in the country. That is why the Church, the people of faith, must rise and prove to the world that faith has power to create a dignified and respected political system in the country. It is high time political parties arose from the Church. It's time true men and women of faith championed the cause of making our country the envy of nations. Let your action prove what you believe. It is not enough to pray and believe that God will change the country. Faith must be backed up by works. Until the people of faith start movements, political parties, create awareness, teach church people to get involved. Train leaders and release them into every sphere of the society, I do not see God coming down to transform the nation. We would keep praying for the next 50 years and the country will still remain the same. Arise and produce exploits by your faith. I believe we can build a dignified nation by faith. We can elevate our nation to the point where every Nigerian who is in the diaspora would desire to return home to contribute his or her own exploits of faith to the sustained growth and development of the nation. One man can change a whole nation by faith. The essence of this book is that men of faith will arise out of the church to transform their nations. The challenge here is that at least one person will take the responsibility of being the deliverer of his/her nation. One man can change an entire nation by faith. St. Patrick was one man but he transformed Ireland. Charles Finney was one man but he changed a whole nation by his faith. Abraham was one man and he subdued a whole nation by his faith. Jesus Christ was one man but he changed the entire world. I am one man, I can change a whole nation by my faith. There are about 200 nations in the world with a total world population of about 7.4 billion people as of August 2016. Having said before, one man can change a whole nation by faith. It will not be out of place to say here again that all that may be needed to change the entire world is nothing more than 200 men and women of faith. If every nation will have just one man or woman of faith arise, then all 200 countries of the world would be changed and won over for God. It is my prayer that the Church will arise and change the world by faith. This call is for you to arise and activate your faith so as to solve the current economic crisis plaguing your nation now with it. This is not the time to give up on your country, but it is time to arise and salvage it by faith. I am fundamentally an optimist. Whether that comes from nature or nurture, I cannot say. Part of being optimistic is keeping one's head pointed toward the sun, one's feet moving forward. There were many dark moments when my faith in humanity was sorely tested, but I would not and could not give myself up to despair. That way lays defeat and death. Nelson Mandela. What problem will your faith solve? Dear friends, our nation is plagued with numerous problems. Each and every one of us who are people of faith should begin to decide which one of these problems we want to solve by our faith. Arise and let your faith put an end to the cry for good leadership and good governance in your country. Let your faith exterminate the corruption and bribery in our political system. Nigerians are lamenting the economic recession and the lack of basic amenities in our communities. Arise, confront and let your faith solve that problem. Many people pray to be kept out of unexpected problems. Some people pray to be able to confront and overcome them. Toba Beta. Instead of praying to God to prevent problems, you should rather confront them and solve them by faith. Prayers alone cannot transform a nation. We must get out of the church building and go do exploits by solving the problems that prevail in our nations. No nation can experience lasting change until men and women of faith arise to bring solutions to every problem in that country. Your faith should cause you to do exploits that will lead to a transformation in the economy of the entire nation. To truly change your nation by faith, you need to take the necessary steps and action that is required, because that is the only way you can bring solutions to your nation by your faith. Your faith should propel you to go invest your time in the library, in the laboratory and in the workshops, discovering and inventing new products that will transform our nation. Your faith should stir up a passion in you to go learn how to drill and refine crude oil, so that we would no longer need to send crude oil abroad for refining. If we as a church believe we can subdue the petroleum sector, we will begin to build refineries in every state until our country is littered with refineries. Dear friends, do you believe that Nigeria could become the biggest oil refining nation in the world? I believe it is possible if we put in the hard work and dedication needed to achieve that. What if men and women of faith arise from the church to take over gold mining, cassava processing, and cocoa processing? I believe it is possible that we would never need to worry about the high cost of these commodities anymore. If you believe it, it is possible. You see, every area of life can be changed and transformed, but only thanks to men and women who will believe. I believe it is obvious to you now that Nigeria can never be developed until God finds people of faith who are interested in national transformation. I pray that you will be among these people of faith who will transform the petroleum sector by their faith. I pray that the church will give birth to heroes of faith who will do exploits in the mining, agricultural, educational and in the aviation sector, and who will by these exploits make Nigeria a praise in the earth. Work out your faith. Dear friends, I have written so much about faith in this book. In the previous chapters, I said that faith is the greatest force in the world and that through the power of faith the territories of the earth could be subdued. Nations can be transformed, and exploits can be done. I, however, want to state here that faith, which is a universal power, can become powerless and weak. Faith can be dead and fruitless. The question is, how can faith become dead and weak? Faith can become dead and weak if it is not backed up by works. You could have all the faith in the world, but if that faith is not backed up by works, it cannot produce any fruit nor create anything. A dead faith cannot produce any result. Faith alone, if not backed up with work, cannot transform a nation. Faith, though being a universal power, will become powerless if work is not added to it. That is why a nation like Nigeria, full of people of faith, is still a third world nation and struggling with economic recession. It is because faith becomes dead if work is not added to it, that our nation is saturated with churches and people professing faith, yet poverty, corruption, lack of electricity, poor educational standard and lack of basic amenities is synonymous with us as a nation. The reason why we are still a developing country after 57 years of independence is that we have citizens living with a dead faith. We are quick at having faith and praying for the development and transformation of our nation, but we are slow at working out what we have faith for. We are only used to the kind of faith that calls on God to do everything for us. We are not taught in churches that until we add work to our faith, that all our prayers and faith in God is useless. It is for this reason that I want to call on as many believers who will be ready to listen to add work to their faith. Faith alone cannot transform a nation, it must be backed up by work. God himself backed up his faith by his works when he created the world. He didn't just believe that he was going to create the world, he worked out his belief, and thanks to that work we have a world today. The scripture in Genesis chapter 2 verse 2 buttressed the fact that God worked out his faith. And on the seventh day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. Genesis chapter 2 verse 2. That is why I said earlier that faith must be backed up by works, and that until the people of faith start movements, political parties that will reform the politics of our nation, create awareness, teach church people to get involved in politics, train leaders and release them into every sphere of the society, I do not see God coming down to transform the nation. It is not only God who backed up his faith by his work, Abraham also backed up his faith by his work. When he believed God that he was going to become the father of nations, he didn't just stop at believing. Abraham, moved ahead to work and labor to create his own nation. Building economic power, sustainable wealth base, laying foundations for the next generations that he couldn't see. He stepped out by faith, changed locations, dug wells, made friends, and fought wars so that by his works, he could bring to pass what he believed. Benson Idahosa worked out his faith by building primary school, secondary school, a university and a hospital. St. Patrick of Ireland worked out his faith by setting up training centers to educate thousands. He transformed civil government. He worked with kings to establish godly laws. He wrote 2 laws which became the basis for civil law in Ireland. The Wright brothers worked out their faith by learning how to steer their machine in a circular route. They backed up their faith by taking the necessary practices in a field not too far from their home. When the brothers believed that they could fly up to 852 feet, that belief led to further experiments. When Valentina Tereshkova believed she could become the first woman in space, it became necessary for her to join the Air Force as an officer so as to become an astronaut. Charles Finney backed up his faith by advocating for social reforms and especially for the abolition of slavery. He worked hard to reduce crime by 2/3 road in his days. Martin Luther worked out his faith during the Reformation by advocating that monasteries be turned into schools. He advocated for education so much so that even before his death, he established a school in Eisleben. He worked out his faith by writing a letter to the civic leaders in government about how schools should be built and how the project could be sponsored financially. Talking about John Knox, history had it that he also worked out his faith by developing a plan for the national educational system in Scotland, and thus relaid the foundations of education. Dear friends, I could go on mentioning names of people who worked out their faith. Looking at the list of people above, you will see that they all worked out what they believed, they all backed up their faith by their works. That is why you and I cannot lock ourselves up in church just praying and believing that one day Nigeria and Africa will be transformed. Doing that will never produce any exploit or results. We will only be having a dead faith if we do that. Truly, faith must be backed up by works if we must transform our nation. The future of my faith. I have stated throughout this book what I think real faith should be used for. My faith has created several exploits in Ukraine and in the world at large which will be too much to narrate in this book. I therefore want to advise anyone who doesn't really know about the exploits of faith God has been able to wrought through me, to try and read my books, The Kingdom-Driven Life, and Church Shift, and Money Won't Make You Rich, as they will give a clue as to what I consider real exploits of faith. However, in this session, I will give you an insight into what I intend to do with my faith in the future. I understand that the greatest exploit of faith is to subdue nations for the King of Kings. I believe that every one of us is supposed to become a nation builder. We were given faith to repair the ruins of nations. Yes, that is the essence of faith, to champion national transformation. Every believer should be a hero of national transformation. So I decided long ago to become the father of many nations. I wish every believer will make the decision too. Dear friends, I don't care what happens, with all my imperfections and failures, I have resolved to repeat the exploits of Father Abraham by my faith. No matter what happens, I will be known in the end to be the father of not just one nation, but I will be known as a father of nations. Why did I make such resolution? It is because I have seen it and I dare to believe God that I can achieve it. I know His hope will not be jeopardized in me. I am going to justify that hope that God had when He was recording the story of Abraham for us to follow. I will let the whole world know that He didn't put that story there for fun and for nothing. Like I said before, there are billions of Christians all over the world and we have just 200 countries. We only need 200 men and women to rise and believe God for a nation and we can bring back the earth to the feet of the Master. I have decided to be one of them. I believe it is not by accident that you are reading this book. God has orchestrated it that way so that a seed of faith will be sown in your heart. That you will dare to believe, and when you dare to believe, God will dare to do great exploits through you. I want to reiterate what those who know me have always heard me say about what I believe. I believe in nation building, and that is what I am going to do with my faith. I am going to transmogrify nations by my faith, beginning from my country Nigeria. Whenever I step into a nation by faith, I turn it over to God. That is exactly what we were given faith for. My intention is to bring God's kingdom upon the nations of the world. It breaks my heart to see nations in distress. I believe it is abnormal for a country to be filled with Christians and churches and still be ravaged by poverty, wickedness and corruption. That is why I am going to Nigeria to transform it with my faith. It doesn't matter what people are saying about Nigeria now. I believe in God and I believe my faith will overcome all those challenges. I believe like Abraham that by my faith, transformation will be brought to Nigeria. I am bringing the kingdom of God to Nigeria. If faith cannot bring down the kingdom of God upon a nation, then that faith is a weak faith. When I come, I will so transmogrify the nation that nobody will recognize it anymore. I know the strategies I have put in place. I know the results I have already created in other circumstances and the result I am going to be able to create in Nigeria by my faith. Nigeria is going to be a destination and a pride to every black person, not just to Nigerians alone. You are going to be proud of your country. Very soon, every country will be talking about Nigeria. Not just because I believe in God, but because I believe in myself also. I have learned how to do it, and I am going back to Nigeria to transform it. I am going to work it out. I am going back with a lot of Europeans. 2,000 people from all over the world are going with me to restore and transform Nigeria. I hear about how difficult life is in Africa. I don't care what difficulty people are talking about. I mean, I don't care how difficult life is in Africa. I know that faith is power and faith can overcome any difficulty. Besides, I've been prepared for 30 years. I have built my faith and done exploits with it. When I go to Nigeria, you will see the exploits of my faith. Nigeria will be changed and turned upside down, just like I have been able to do in Ukraine and in the Russian world in general. I believe it is possible and I know how to do it. Listen closely. I am emphatic about this. I am moving back to Africa, and I am going to Nigeria because that is the future of the world. If you are really a man of faith, you will understand that faith is a weapon. A believer is an asset to any society because of his faith. Any believer who practices and puts his faith to work to develop his society will be treasured by his people and his country. I am not just coming to Nigeria by faith, I am coming with a plan and an algorithm of how to transform the nation by my faith and by my actions. When God instructed me to go back to Nigeria, He gave me 25 points, concrete assignments, and said these are the things you are supposed to go there to do. Therefore, I have enough work to back up my faith. You may think I have taken Jesus too seriously, but listen to me. If God said it is possible, then I believe it's possible. If He says it's possible that I should embark on this project, I go ahead to execute it, believing like Abraham did. I don't care what the world thinks. I have chosen to believe in God, and there is no doubt in my heart. I just kind of believe Him all the way. I believe in the transformation of Nigeria, and it will happen for the whole world to see. Who will believe? In conclusion of this book, I wish to join hands together with Prophet Isaiah and raise up my voice in expectation, calling to all who will dare believe. To those who will dare believe God for the redemption of their nations. Who has believed our report? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? Isaiah 53:1. The question of the hour is, who will believe God for his own sphere of life? Who will believe God for his own calling? Who will dare to believe God for his whole nation? Who will believe our report, that to God everything is possible? Who will believe our report that God is not a liar? Who will believe that Jesus is not a deceiver? Who will believe that forever, O Lord, your words are established in heaven? Who will believe? Who will believe that nations are to be delivered to the feet of the Master by faith? Who will believe that this exploit is possible by ordinary men and women? Who will believe that God is not a respecter of persons? Who will believe that to them that believe, the arm of God is revealed? Who will believe that only through faith God's might is manifested? Who will believe so that the greatness of God might be manifested through him? Who will believe? To whom shall this arm of God be revealed? Who is it that will experience this arm of the Almighty? Who will believe? Who will believe that Abraham is not special? Who will believe? Who will believe that what God says, God means? Who will believe? Who will believe that the only thing that matters in this kingdom is your faith, faith in the words of the Master? Who will believe? Who will believe that today there are men and women of faith being raised up who are going to become fathers of nations? Who will believe that he too can join the league of those who became fathers of nations? Who would believe today? To them that believe is the arm of God revealed, to them that believe is the might of God revealed, to them that believe. To them is the muscle of the Almighty unveiled. Who will believe to become fathers of nations? Who will believe to become fathers of generations? Who will believe to become fathers of movements? Who will believe to become fathers of spheres of life? Who will believe to join the league of fathers of faith like John Wesley? Who would believe? Who will believe like Martin Luther? Who will believe? Who will believe like Charles Finney? Who will believe? Who will believe like Jonathan Edwards? Who will believe? Who will believe like Bishop Idahosa? Who will believe? Who will believe like Apostle Babalola? Who will believe? Who will believe like Pastor Adeboye? Who will believe? Who will like Bishop Oyedepo? Who will believe? Who will believe like Smith Wigglesworth? Who will believe? Who will believe like William Seymour? Who will believe? Who will believe like John Knox? Who will believe? Who will believe like Martin Luther? Who will believe? Who will believe like Saint Patrick? Who will believe? To them that believe is the arm of God revealed. All things are possible to them that believe. Go and create exploits by your faith. Go and transform your nation and sphere of influence by faith. Boldly go. 1. Unfortunately, we have chosen religion over faith. We have exalted religion above real faith. We neglected that which has the power to resolve all our national challenges and rather settled for that which is weak, ineffective and non-productive. 2. Instead of us to reign by faith, we have allowed ourselves to be weakened by religion, fear and ignorance. 3. You are supposed to reign as a king in your nation by the exploits of faith you produce. Your exploits of faith are supposed to give you some form of relevance and respect. 4. It will be foolishness to just preach about being the light of the world without giving light to all the spheres of influence and sectors in our country. 5. The Church must raise up an army of men and women whose faith would produce exploits that will illuminate any sphere of the country where there is darkness. 6. It is time to come out of hiding and go touch the world with our results and exploits. 7. If we are really a people of faith, one of our exploits will be to put an end to darkness wherever we find it in the society. 8. Can change any sphere of influence in the country. That is why the Church, the people of faith, must rise and prove to the world that faith has power to create a dignified and respected political system in the country. 9. Until the people of faith start movements, political parties, create awareness, teach church people to get involved. Train leaders and release them into every sphere of the society, I don't see God coming down to transform the nation. 10. This call is for you to arise and activate your faith so as to solve the current economic crisis plaguing your nation now with it. 11. Instead of praying to God to prevent problems, you should rather confront them and solve them by faith. 12. We must get out of the church building and go do exploits by solving the problems that prevail in our nations. 13. No nation can experience lasting change until men and women of faith arise to bring solutions to every problem in that country. 14. Your faith should propel you to go invest your time in the library, in the laboratory and in the workshops discovering and inventing new products that will transform our nation. 15. If you are really a man of faith, that is a weapon right there. A believer is an asset to any society. A believer is an asset to any country.